The polished conference table in my own office felt cold beneath my fingertips. I sat at the head, facing two ghosts from my past who had once held my professional destiny in their hands. Across from me were Kyle and Ben from Apex Consulting, but they weren't here as clients seeking our services. Kyle slid a single piece of paper across the glossy surface with a condescending smile. My old resume from 5 years ago, complete with the youthful headshot I'd been so proud of back then. My younger, hopeful face smiled up from the corner, a painful reminder of dreams I'd once cherished but since outgrown. "We found this while cleaning out our archives," Kyle said with that familiar mocking chuckle I remembered all too well. Ben pointed a well-manicured finger at the summary section, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Visionary leader capable of transformative strategies? You were basically an intern at a small-town bookstore when you sent this to us." Heat flooded my cheeks at the memory of how much that resume had meant to me, but I pressed my lips together, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing my reaction. Kyle stood, adjusting his expensive suit jacket with a theatrical flourish. "Let's be honest, Chloe. Some people simply aren't cut out for prestigious firms like Apex. The standards are just different. No hard feelings." They strode out of my office without another glance, leaving the crumpled resume behind like yesterday's trash on my polished wood table. My mind drifted back 5 years to my cramped college dorm room where dreams felt both limitless and fragile. The blue light of my laptop illuminated my tired but determined face as I carefully crafted each line of that resume, pouring my heart into every word. I remembered how my hands had trembled with excitement while typing the final words, believing this document could be my ticket to a better future. My senior project had been my pride and joy, helping, the last chapter, our beloved local bookstore, avoid closing down through creative community engagement strategies. I'd created a simple but effective marketing plan that brought in new customers while celebrating what regulars had always loved about the place, showing how small businesses could thrive with the right approach. With a deep breath that felt like it contained all my hopes and fears, I attached the file to an email addressed to Apex Consulting's hiring manager, my cursor hovering over the send button. This was it. My dream company, the pinnacle of success that all my business professors had spoken of with reverence. I whispered a quiet prayer to myself, hoping against hope for any entry-level position that would give me a foot in the door to this world I so desperately wanted to join. When my finger finally clicked send, my heart swelled with boundless hope and possibility, imagining the future that might unfold from this single moment. The rejection email arrived exactly 2 weeks later, though each day had felt like a month as I waited for any response. I'd been checking my inbox obsessively, my stomach fluttering every time my phone buzzed with a new notification. When the message from Norripley at apex-consulting.com finally appeared in my inbox, my heart sank before I even opened it, somehow already knowing what it would contain. The words were cold and impersonal, clearly copied and pasted to countless other hopeful applicants. "Thank you for your interest in Apex Consulting. After careful review, we have decided to pursue other candidates whose qualifications better match our current needs. We wish you success in your future endeavors." They hadn't even bothered to use my name, reducing my carefully crafted application to just another rejected file in their system. Over the following month, I sent out 20 more applications to various consulting firms across the city, each one tailored and personalized. Each rejection, or worse, the complete silence that felt even more dismissive, chipped away at my confidence until I began questioning whether I had any real talent at all. My savings dwindled to nothing, the numbers in my bank account shrinking with terrifying speed, forcing me to accept a receptionist position at a local plumbing company just to keep a roof over my head. The work was mind-numbing, answering phones, sorting mail, filing invoices, and each monotonous day felt like another step away from the future I'd imagined for myself during those late nights in the library. During my lunch breaks at the plumbing company, I'd often scroll through LinkedIn while eating my sad desk sandwich, watching former classmates celebrate their career milestones in my chosen field. One particularly depressing Tuesday, Kyle's profile popped up in my suggestions as someone I might know, his smiling face seeming to mock my current circumstances. He'd been promoted to vice president at Apex Consulting, the announcement gleaming with corporate pride. His profile picture showed him in an impeccably tailored suit, flashing a confident smile against the backdrop of a sleek, modern office that looked nothing like my drab workspace. His education section listed an Ivy League MBA from a school I could never have afforded, and his experience was filled with impressive-sounding projects from major corporations that I could only dream of working with. He represented everything I wasn't. Connected, privileged, polished, and seemingly destined for success from birth. Meanwhile, I was spending my days coordinating plumbing appointments and trying to make ends meet on a salary that barely covered my student loan payments. The injustice burned in my chest every time I saw his smug face staring back at me from the screen, a constant reminder of the different worlds we inhabited. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday evening that perfectly matched my gloomy mood. I was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills that seemed to multiply whenever I looked away, tears of frustration streaming down my face. I'd just been chewed out by the plumbing company owner for a scheduling error that wasn't even my fault, taking the blame for someone else's mistake because I was the most disposable employee. In that moment of complete despair, something inside me snapped, a fundamental shift in how I saw myself and my possibilities. I was tired of begging for opportunities from people who couldn't see my worth, exhausted from trying to fit into a system that seemed designed to keep people like me out. I opened my laptop with renewed determination, the glow of the screen cutting through the dim kitchen light. Using my last $500 that was supposed to cover next month's rent, I registered an LLC, my fingers trembling not with fear but with purpose. The name came to me instantly, as if it had been waiting in my subconscious. Veritas Solutions. I remembered from a college philosophy class that veritas meant truth, in Latin, a concept that felt refreshing in a world of corporate spin. It was a quiet promise to myself, my company would be built on honesty, transparency, and real results, not fancy degrees or empty promises that looked good in presentations but delivered little value. Though it was just words on a screen then, the official registration confirmation email felt like planting a flag on my future, claiming territory that was truly mine. My first client was Henderson's Hardware, a family-owned store that had been struggling to compete with a big-box retailer that moved into town, threatening to erase 3 generations of hard work. Old Mr. Henderson eyed me skeptically when I showed up in my one professional outfit, clearly wondering what this young woman could possibly teach him about running a business he'd owned for 40 years. I offered to work for free for the first month, just to prove my value, betting on myself when no one else would. Instead of complex business jargon that would have alienated him, I simply listened. To him, his employees, and his customers, understanding that the best solutions come from truly understanding the problem. I noticed they had a loyal base of older residents who weren't online much, but their grandchildren were constantly on their phones, creating a generational gap in their marketing. I helped Mr. Henderson's teenage granddaughter set up a simple website and social media presence focused on their unique inventory and friendly service, things the big chain store couldn't replicate. Within 2 months, their sales increased by 30%, not through magic but through practical strategies that played to their strengths. The payment check felt good, validating my risk, but the handwritten note Mr. Henderson included meant more, his shaky cursive conveying genuine emotion. You saved our family's business when we had lost all hope. I framed that note and hung it above my desk where I could see it daily, a tangible reminder that my approach could make a real difference. The next 3 years became a blur of relentless work and sacrifice, each day blending into the next in a cycle of client meetings, strategy sessions, and late nights. I converted my small apartment's living room into an office, the couch becoming both my workspace and my bed as I often fell asleep between late-night strategy sessions, my laptop still open beside me. My social life disappeared completely, replaced by client calls and business planning, my friends gradually stopping their invitations when I always said I was too busy. Slowly, steadily, Veritas began to grow from a desperate idea into something real, each small success building towards something substantial. I hired Maria first, a brilliant numbers person who'd been passed over for promotions at her previous job because she didn't have a degree, her talent obvious to anyone who looked beyond credentials. Then came Jake, whose straightforward talking had been labeled unprofessional at his previous corporate job, but clients appreciated his honesty and lack of corporate double talk. We were a team of misfits, united by our shared experience of being underestimated and overlooked in traditional corporate environments. We focused on delivering measurable results rather than flashy presentations that said little, building a reputation as the firm that actually fixed problems rather than just identifying them in expensive reports that gathered dust on shelves. The industry earthquake began with a headline on a major business news site that stopped me mid-sip of my morning coffee: Prestige consultants caught in data manipulation scandal. One of the largest and most respected consulting firms had been systematically falsifying reports to make their clients' performance appear stronger than it actually was, betraying the trust that formed the foundation of their business. The story exploded across all financial media, sending shockwaves through the business world and making clients question everything they thought they knew about their advisors. Clients suddenly grew suspicious of traditional consulting powerhouses with their complex models and impressive but empty presentations, recognizing style over substance. The very things we'd been criticized for, our simplicity, our transparency, our focus on actual implementation rather than just advice, became our greatest strengths in this new environment of skepticism. Our phones started ringing constantly with companies looking for partners they could actually trust, who would tell them the truth even when it was difficult. The landscape had shifted overnight in our favor, validating the principles we'd built our company upon when everyone said we were naive. The irony wasn't lost on me when Business Today published their annual Firms to Watch list that highlighted companies poised for major growth. Veritas Solutions landed at number 3, with the article praising our refreshingly honest approach and remarkable client retention that stood in stark contrast to industry norms. My team gathered around my computer screen, cheering and hugging each other like we'd won the championship, the years of struggle making this moment taste even sweeter. That same afternoon, as the celebration continued with pizza I ordered for everyone, a new email notification popped up that made my breath catch in my throat. The sender address was unmistakable. It was from the executive office of Apex Consulting, the very institution that had once rejected me so dismissively. The subject line read, "Meeting request to discuss potential partnership opportunities." The body mentioned their interest in leveraging our fresh perspective to address evolving client needs in the current business climate. After all these years of being ignored, dismissed, and condescended to, they were coming to me, asking for my help to save themselves from irrelevance. I gathered my team in our small conference room to share the news about Apex's meeting request, watching their faces carefully as I broke the news. Their reactions were immediately and unanimously negative, the historical wounds still fresh for all of us. "They're vampires," Chloe, Maria said, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as if protecting herself from the very idea. "They don't want to partner, they want to suck us dry and steal our methods, then discard us once they've taken what they want." Jake nodded vigorously, his normally cheerful face dark with concern. "After how they treated you? After how they've treated everyone like us who didn't fit their mold. We shouldn't even respond to their email, they don't deserve our attention." I listened carefully to their concerns, understanding their anger completely because I felt it too, that old hurt still living in my bones. But beneath my calm exterior, something else stirred, not excitement at the prospect of working with them, but resolve to face the ghosts of my past on my own terms. "I understand how you feel," I told them, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "But I need to take this meeting. I need to see this through." I sent the confirmation email that afternoon, already picturing Kyle's face when he realized who he'd be dealing with, not the scared recent graduate he remembered, but a successful CEO who had built something he now needed. Instead of preparing a standard sales pitch full of the corporate buzzwords Apex would expect, I assigned my team a different, more revealing task: conduct a discreet but thorough analysis of Apex's public failures over the past 5 years, looking for patterns in their decline. We examined their client departures, reading between the lines of press releases to understand why long-term relationships had ended. We studied their published case studies, noting the gaps between their claimed successes and the actual outcomes we could verify. We analyzed their executive statements, detecting the subtle shifts in language that indicated growing desperation. The pattern that emerged was clear and damning. They consistently prioritized short-term, flashy results over sustainable growth, choosing what looked good in quarterly reports over what actually built lasting value. Their strategies looked impressive in boardroom presentations but often collapsed within 18 months, leaving clients worse off than before and feeling betrayed by the empty promises. We compiled our findings into a straightforward report that documented this pattern of unsustainable solutions, creating a mirror that showed them their own reflection. I had no intention of showing it to them during our meeting. That would be playing their game. This knowledge was my armor, my psychological preparation, my reminder of why I'd started Veritas and what we stood against in this industry. The day of the meeting arrived with a strange sense of destiny, bringing me full circle to the scene that had played out in my imagination for years. Kyle and Ben sat across from me in my own conference room, but this time the power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. They were in my space, asking for my help to save their floundering company. Yet their condescension remained unchanged, as if their superiority was so ingrained they couldn't switch it off even when they were the supplicants. Kyle produced my old resume like a magician revealing what he thought was a devastating trick, that familiar mocking chuckle I remembered from my interview still intact. "We found this in our archives," he said, as if presenting evidence of a crime. Ben pointed contemptuously at the summary, his finger jabbing at the paper. "Visionary leader? From what I recall, you were basically an intern when you applied to us, with no real experience to speak of." The word struck with the force of a physical blow, momentarily transporting me back to that insecure recent graduate who had cried after their rejection. But as I looked at their smug faces, seeing the identical expressions they'd worn 5 years earlier, the old shame transformed into something else. A cold, clear certainty about who I was and what I'd built despite their attempts to make me feel small. After Kyle and Ben left my office, their laughter still echoing in the hallway, Maria appeared in the doorway, her face etched with concern that mirrored what my own probably should have shown. "What happened? What did they say? Are you okay?" she asked in a rush, clearly expecting me to be upset or angry. I realized I'd been sitting perfectly still, my hands flat on the table where they'd left my crumpled resume as a final insult. I looked up slowly, a new kind of smile spreading across my face, not joyful, but purposeful and determined, the expression of someone who has finally seen their path clearly. "I'm perfectly fine," I told her, my voice steady and sure, surprising even myself with how true the words felt. In fact, I've never been more clear-headed about what needs to happen next. There were no tears, no angry outburst, no desire to chase after them and demand respect. Instead, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation, as if their mockery had severed the last invisible thread connecting me to their approval. I returned to my desk with purposeful strides, my mind already constructing a new plan that would change everything. I knew from our research that Apex's most valuable remaining client was Steadfast Industries, a family-owned manufacturing company renowned throughout the industry for its integrity and refusal to compromise its values for profit. Their CEO, Mr. Miller, was known as a no-nonsense man of principle who valued honesty above all else in business relationships. I found his direct office line through an old industry directory, my finger hesitating for only a second before dialing, knowing this call could change everything. He answered on the second ring with a brisk, "Miller speaking," his voice exactly as I'd imagined, direct and uncompromising. I introduced myself simply as Chloe from Veritas Solutions, keeping my tone respectful but confident. "I'm not calling to sell you anything," I said quickly, wanting to distinguish myself from the countless sales calls he undoubtedly received. "I have one observation I believe you should be aware of as a matter of professional courtesy. If you examine the long-term data on the supplier consolidation strategy Apex implemented for you 18 months ago, I think you'll discover a pattern of declining quality and rising costs they likely didn't adequately disclose when presenting their recommendations." I thanked him for his time and hung up before he could ask questions, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I'd just given away my most valuable insight for free, betting everything on one conversation. Exactly 10 days later, business news outlets exploded with the announcement that sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Steadfast Industries was terminating its decade-long relationship with Apex Consulting, effective immediately. Mr. Miller himself gave a brief but powerful statement to the press that was quoted everywhere. "We are seeking business partners whose definition of success aligns with ours, sustainable growth built on transparency and shared values, not short-term gains built on obscured truths and broken promises." The business world reeled from the news, recognizing it as a watershed moment in the industry. Losing Steadfast wasn't just a financial blow to Apex, it was a devastating reputational hit from which they might never recover, calling their entire business model into question. Their stock price began a sharp decline as investors questioned the stability of their remaining client relationships, the numbers flashing red on every financial screen. That single phone call, that moment of professional courage, had set in motion a chain of events that would shake Apex to its very foundations, proving that truth could indeed be more powerful than spin. Inside Apex's headquarters, panic erupted in the sterile hallways that had once represented corporate invincibility. I heard from a former classmate who still worked there that emergency meetings were called continuously, with executives running between conference rooms with panicked expressions. Kyle was summoned to the executive boardroom where voices were raised loud enough to be heard through the closed doors, the polished calm of the place shattered by fear and anger. The board was furious. Losing Steadfast had triggered a cascade of client defections as other companies questioned whether Apex could be trusted with their business. Their switchboards lit up with termination notices from clients who had been with them for years, each call another blow to their crumbling empire. The company was hemorrhaging millions by the hour as projects were cancelled and retainers terminated, and they had no contingency plan to stop the bleeding because they'd never imagined this could happen. Kyle was given an ultimatum by the frightened board: fix the crisis he'd created through his arrogant leadership or face immediate termination himself. The pressure transformed him almost overnight from a confident executive to a desperate man, the polished facade cracking to reveal the fear beneath. My office phone rang early on a Monday morning, the sound cutting through my concentration as I reviewed our growing client roster. Sophia's concerned voice came through the intercom. "Chloe, it's Kyle from Apex on line 1. He sounds different." I took a deep, steadying breath, centering myself before picking up the receiver, knowing this call would represent a significant moment in our history. "Kyle," I said evenly, keeping my tone professional and neutral. His voice was unrecognizable, all the polished confidence had been stripped away, leaving only raw desperation that he didn't even try to hide. "Chloe, we need to talk seriously about how we can help each other here. How about a subcontracting arrangement? You help us stabilize our remaining client relationships, lend us some of that credibility you've built, and we pay you handsomely for it." He named a figure that would have made my head spin a year earlier, a sum that represented more than our current annual revenue. He clearly expected the money to dazzle me, still operating under the assumption that everyone had their price, that principles could always be bought if the number was high enough. He hadn't learned anything at all about what drove me or what Veritas truly represented in the marketplace. I let the silence stretch out after Kyle finished speaking, allowing the weight of my refusal to build in the space between us, wanting him to truly hear my response. "I appreciate the offer, Kyle," I said finally, my tone calm but firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "But the answer is no. Veritas doesn't engage in partnerships of convenience with companies whose fundamental values contradict everything we stand for. We won't lend our name to clean up a mess that was created by the very business practices we've built our company to oppose." I could hear his sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, the sound of someone realizing their last option has vanished. My refusal wasn't just a business decision, it was a public repudiation of everything Apex represented, a statement that some things matter more than money. I knew the news would spread quickly through their offices, further eroding whatever morale remained among the employees who were already jumping ship daily. An interesting phenomenon began occurring throughout that week, one I hadn't anticipated but perhaps should have. Our general inquiry inbox started flooding with resumes, but these weren't from recent graduates or typical job seekers. They came from Apex's mid-level managers, senior analysts, and even a few directors who saw the writing on the wall and wanted off the sinking ship. Their cover letters told a consistent story of disillusionment and ethical compromise. "I'm tired of being asked to compromise my ethics to make numbers look better," one wrote with palpable frustration. "I want to actually help clients rather than just bill hours and produce pretty presentations," said another, echoing the very reasons I'd started Veritas. "I'm looking for a company where integrity matters more than appearances and where I can be proud of the work I do," confessed a third, their words resonating deeply with my own journey. We were attracting their best and most principled talent without any recruitment effort, becoming a refuge for those disillusioned with Apex's toxic culture and empty values. The brain drain was accelerating their collapse from within, as the people who actually did the work abandoned them for something better. The official announcement came via a press release distributed to all major business outlets, the corporate language unable to disguise the stunning downfall. Apex Consulting announces leadership restructuring, the headline read, the euphemism doing little to soften the blow. The body of the release stated that Kyle and several other senior executives had been terminated, effective immediately, as part of a strategic repositioning to better align with evolving market conditions. The corporate speak couldn't disguise the truth. Kyle had been made the scapegoat for the firm's catastrophic failure, the sacrificial lamb offered up to appease shareholders and the remaining clients. His professional reputation was irreparably damaged, his photograph appearing in the business section beside articles analyzing Apex's stunning downfall and what it meant for the consulting industry. The man who had once held my future in his hands, who had dismissed my dreams with a condescending smile, now had no future of his own in the industry he had dominated for so long. The irony was both satisfying and sobering. Just when I believed the chapter with Apex was finally closed, the last page turned on that part of my history, my phone buzzed with another familiar number that I hadn't expected to see again. Ben's voice was nearly unrecognizable when I answered, stripped of all its former smugness and superiority, replaced by a frantic, pleading tone. "Chloe, please," he begged, the words tumbling out in a rushed, panicked stream. "I need work. Anything." Everything that happened was Kyle's doing. His strategies, his decisions, his arrogance. I was just following his lead, doing what I was told to keep my job. "I always knew you had real talent," I told him that during your interview, but he wouldn't listen. I held the phone slightly away from my ear, disgusted by his complete lack of loyalty and his desperate attempt to rewrite history to save himself. He was eagerly sacrificing his former mentor, throwing Kyle under the bus without a second thought now that the ship was sinking. "I'm sorry, Ben," I said, my voice cool but polite, maintaining my professionalism even when he had abandoned his. "We're not currently hiring for any positions that would be suitable for someone with your background and experience." I ended the call, feeling not the sweet taste of victory I might have expected, but a profound sense of disappointment at how quickly principles could be abandoned when comfort was threatened. The final, definitive end came on a rainy afternoon much like the one when I'd started Veritas, the weather perfectly matching the mood of the occasion. Apex Consulting issued a terse, 3-paragraph statement announcing they were filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and ceasing operations immediately, their once powerful brand now reduced to a legal proceeding. The once mighty firm that had dominated the consulting landscape for decades, that had rejected me without a second thought, that had made countless others feel small and inadequate with their elitist hiring practices, was gone, erased from the business world as if they had never existed. Their sleek headquarters would be emptied, the expensive art and furniture auctioned off to pay creditors. Their name would be removed from the building, their logo stripped from the walls, their legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about hubris and hollow values in an industry that ultimately demands substance. The empire that had laughed at my resume, that had built itself on exclusion and privilege rather than merit and results, no longer existed except as a memory and a lesson. The victory felt less like celebration and more like natural justice finally asserting itself. Several weeks after the bankruptcy announcement, when the dust had begun to settle and Apex was becoming a fading memory in the industry, I was reviewing financial projections for our planned expansion when Sophia's nervous voice came through my intercom, hesitant and uncertain. "Chloe? There's someone here to see you without an appointment. He says it's urgent." It's Kyle." A strange calm settled over me at the announcement, the anticipation I might have felt replaced by a quiet resolution. I walked out to the reception area, my steps measured and deliberate. The man waiting there bore little resemblance to the arrogant executive I'd known for years. The transformation was both shocking and complete. His expensive suit was wrinkled as if he'd been sleeping in it, his hair slightly unkempt instead of perfectly styled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and defeat from months of stress and failure. He looked smaller somehow, as if the collapse of his career had physically diminished him, stripping away the aura of power that had once surrounded him. The powerful, condescending figure from the conference room had been replaced by a desperate stranger who had nowhere left to go. "Chloe," he began, his voice cracking on the second syllable, the uncertainty painful to hear from someone who had always been so sure of himself. He cleared his throat and tried again, visibly gathering what little dignity he had left. I need a job. Anything at all. An entry-level position, a junior analyst, a research assistant. I'll take anything you can offer, anything that will pay the bills. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, the nervous gesture so unlike his former controlled demeanor. I was wrong about you. I see that now, clearly and without any doubt. You were the one who understood what really matters in business, who saw where the industry was heading when I was too blinded by our own success to see it. You were the true visionary all along, and I was too arrogant to recognize it. The words I'd once dreamed of hearing, that would have meant everything to that younger version of myself, now felt hollow and meaningless, arriving 5 years too late to matter. He stood in my lobby, surrounded by my team who had stopped working to watch the scene unfold, completely vulnerable and pleading for mercy from someone he had once considered beneath his notice. The humiliation was absolute and entirely of his own making, the final consequence of a career built on the wrong foundations. I looked at the broken man before me, this living embodiment of my past struggles and insecurities, and felt something unexpected and surprising, not vengeance or gloating, but profound clarity about the different paths we had chosen. Kyle, I said, my voice quiet but carrying clearly through the reception area so everyone could hear the principles we stood for. Your failure was never about credentials or resumes or pedigrees. It was always about character, about who you are when no one is watching, about the values you uphold when they're inconvenient, about the truths you tell when lies would be easier. I let my words hang in the air, wanting them to sink in not just for him but for everyone present. You built your company on sand, on appearances, on shortcuts, on deception and exclusion. We built ours on bedrock. On truth, on hard work, on genuine results that stand the test of time. I met his desperate gaze steadily, showing him the strength that comes from building something real. Veritas only hires people who share our fundamental values, who believe that how you succeed matters as much as whether you succeed. There is no place for you here, because what you represent is everything we exist to change. I turned and walked back toward my office without another glance, the chapter finally and definitively closed. Sophia handed me a list of new clients, all former Apex loyalists now seeking a better way of doing business. I smiled, not at Kyle's downfall, but at the future we were building, a future forged from truth and earned through integrity, where what you do matters more than where you came from.